Before the wind in Elmwick Park turned sharp, I told myself this was a picnic. Briarhaven, Ohio was gray with October, the kind of gray that makes every breath feel borrowed. The bench I chose had splinters along the edge and a view of the playground's peeling paint. In my lap sat a foam takeout box, warm only because I kept my palms on it like prayer. People walked by without looking, their faces tucked into scarves, their lives intact. I watched them like a hungry person watches a window waiting for something to change, even though nothing ever changes. I picked the farthest bench from the road because distance is the last kind of privacy you get when you are running. 9 days ago, I still believed in doors that closed behind me. Now I believe in angles, shadows, and exits. I keep my back to the oak tree so nobody can come from behind without my hearing gravel shift. In my coat pocket, my whole plan weighs less than a candy bar, $11.40, a bent key, a charger, and a grocery receipt I keep rereading like it might turn into money. I count it as if counting helps. Maddie sat to my left, 7 years old, knees tucked up, eyes moving the way grown men's eyes move in bad neighborhoods. She tracks shoes, not faces. She watches hands. If a dog barks, she stiffens before she looks. June, 5, sat to my right and tried very hard to be 5. She followed pigeons with her gaze, whispering stories to herself, letting her imagination do the job my money couldn't. Their jackets didn't match. Maddie in a thin pink hoodie. June in an oversized gray one that swallowed her wrists. I braided their hair that morning with shaking fingers. People say motherhood is instinct, but mine has become choreography. I wipe syrup smudges that aren't there. I straighten collars that won't keep out cold. I press kisses onto foreheads and whisper promises inside my chest where the girls can't hear the tremor. I keep my voice gentle because the world has been loud enough. I learned to do this in the same house where I learned to lower my eyes and soften my steps. The ritual is my shield. If I look like a mom on a picnic, maybe nobody notices I'm surviving. Maybe I can pretend, just longer. It has been 9 nights since I left Clay Rusk, and every night since has tasted like metal. I sleep in the driver's seat because the back doesn't lie flat, and I keep the keys between my fingers like a habit I hate. We rotate parking lots the way some families rotate restaurants. The Walmart by the highway, the hospital garage, the 24-hour laundromat. I never stay long enough to be found twice. The girls think it is an adventure when I let them pick the next place. I nod and let them believe it for now. Anyway. Today's lunch came from a gas station off Route 6, rice and beans packed in a foam box that sweats through the lid. I told myself it was better than chips, better than nothing, better than going back. The girls ate slowly, not because they weren't hungry, but because they have learned that slow makes food last and lasting makes me look less scared. Maddie arranged beans into a circle like she was building a tiny wall. June chewed and watched the pigeons patrol the path like they were soldiers on duty. I took bites, leaving the rest for them. The cold kept creeping under our sleeves, and the park kept pretending it didn't notice us. I was counting again, not just money, but daylight. How long until the sun slid behind the apartments and the air turned mean? Maddie's eyes kept drifting to the path that led to the street. June leaned toward me, her face serious in a way that didn't fit her round cheeks. She asked, in that simple child way, whether eating today meant there would be nothing tomorrow. The question wasn't about food, it was about trust in time. Throat tightened, and I forgot air. I opened my mouth to reassure her, to offer comfort. Then June added a second question, softer, almost careful, asking what would happen if we went back home. She didn't say his name. Her eyes flicked to my cheek as if she could still see the memory there, as if bruises could live forever. She wanted to know if he would hurt me again, too. My hands went still on the takeout lid. Somewhere behind my ribs, an old alarm began ringing. I pulled both girls closer, breathing slow so they would copy me. I could not lie fast enough. For a moment, the park narrowed to the size of that bench. Wind, gravel, my pulse. Maddie leaned into my side, pretending she wasn't listening, but I felt her ribs flutter with quick breaths. June's fingers found mine and held tight like she was anchoring me to the world. I told myself to look ordinary, to move slowly, to keep the girls calm. Then the air changed, the way it does before a storm breaks. I felt it on my neck. Someone was watching us from close enough to hear the truth in my silence. Not a passerby. Not friendly. I didn't turn right away. The moment I felt those eyes, my body did what it has been trained to do. It went quiet. Breath shallow. Shoulders tight. My hand slid behind June's back, not to hug her, but to keep her close if I had to move fast. I listened for footsteps on gravel, for the soft scrape of someone stopping, for the rhythm that tells you whether a person is wandering or hunting. When I finally looked, I didn't look like a normal person looks. I scanned. Height first, hands second, distance third. He stood near the path, half-shadowed by an oak that still held a few stubborn leaves. Dark coat, broad shoulders. Not young, not shaky. His hands were out, visible, empty. No phone raised, no casual grin. Just a stillness that made the air feel heavier. People noticed him without meaning to. A jogger slowed and crossed the grass. A couple with a stroller turned back toward the street as if they had forgotten something. The park didn't get loud when he arrived. It got careful. That was the thing about certain men in Briarhaven. You didn't always know their names, but your body learned to recognize the space they took up, the way water pulls away from a boat's hull. I had heard the name Dominic Carver the way you hear sirens at night, distant but familiar. In North Briar, barbers and bartenders traded stories in lowered voices, and even people who hated criminals spoke his name with the caution you reserve for a live wire. I didn't know his face from a photo, but my nerves recognized him anyway. He carried himself like someone who could end a problem with a phone call and never raise his voice in this city. My first thought was Clay. Not that Clay was here, but that Clay had sent someone. That is what control does after you leave. It grows arms you can't see. I had been living inside that idea for 9 nights, sleeping with my keys, $11.40 in my pocket, waking every time headlights painted the inside of my car. I chose the farthest bench because it gave me seconds. Seconds to stand. Seconds to gather the girls. Seconds to run if a man with anger stepped out of a vehicle. Maddie felt my shift. She didn't ask anything. She didn't have to. Her spine straightened and her gaze locked on the stranger like she was memorizing him for court. June kept watching pigeons, but her fingers tightened around mine. I forced my face to stay soft, because fear is contagious, and kids catch it faster than colds. The man didn't come toward us. Not at first. He moved to a bench across the path and sat the way someone sits when they aren't trying to impress anybody. Elbows on knees, eyes forward. He could have been watching leaves skid across the pavement, except I felt the attention like a low hum. The distance mattered. 10 yards, maybe more. Close enough to protect, far enough to leave me room to say no. I hated that my mind even considered protection. I hated that I had started ranking strangers by how dangerous their help might be. Once my rule was simple. You do not take anything from anyone who might ask for payment later. Clay taught me that. Gifts became debts. Apologies became traps. Even kindness came with a receipt. So when a man like this sat across from me, my stomach did not relax. It tightened, preparing for the price. After a few minutes, he stood and walked slowly, on hands still visible, steps measured on the gravel as if he was counting them. He stopped well short of my bench, leaving a space that felt intentional. He looked at the girls first, not in a cute way, but in the way someone checks if people are cold. I remember thinking that his eyes looked like winter lake water, calm on top, deep underneath. When he spoke, it wasn't loud. It was controlled, the kind of voice that doesn't need volume because rooms lean toward it. He asked if we had eaten something warm today. I didn't answer right away. My mouth wanted to say we were fine, because that lie is automatic, a reflex built from years of surviving. Instead, I nodded toward the takeout box, and even that felt like admitting weakness. He didn't argue with me. He didn't tell me what I should do. He offered a simple next step. May's Corner Grill. 2 blocks over, hot food in a booth away from the wind, and he would cover it if I would allow it. Allow it. That was the word that hit me. Not need, not deserve, not take. Allow. The difference made my throat burn. It sounded like choice. It sounded like dignity. It sounded like something I had forgotten was possible. I stared at his hands, still open at his sides, and wondered what kind of dangerous man cared about permission. Maddie shifted again, sharper this time. Her chin lifted and her eyes narrowed with the courage of a child who has seen too much and decided to stand anyway. I felt the question forming inside her before it reached her lips, and my heart pitched forward, caught between dread and the fragile, terrifying thought that maybe we could follow. Dominic walked ahead of us, not close enough to herd, and not far enough to vanish. He kept to the edge of the path like he was showing me the route without stealing my choice. I held June's hand, and Maddie stayed tight to my hip, her eyes flicking from his boots to the street to the bare branches overhead. The wind followed us out of Elmwick Park, pushing dry leaves across the sidewalk like small warnings. Every storefront window reflected us back. A mother with 2 kids and a stranger built like a courthouse. I kept waiting for the moment when help turned into a trap. May's Corner Grill sat on Whitlow Avenue, brick and stubborn, with a faded neon sign that looked tired but still worked. When we stepped inside, the bell over the door rang bright and sharp, and heat hit my face so hard my eyes stung. The air smelled like grilled onions, coffee, and dish soap. Fog clung to the windows from the inside, turning the street into watercolor. Vinyl booths squeaked when people shifted. It should have felt safe. Instead, it felt like a stage. The room noticed Dominic before it noticed me. A man at the counter lowered his voice. A waitress paused mid-step, then smoothed her apron like she had suddenly remembered her posture. Nobody stared, but everyone adjusted, the way birds do when a larger animal enters the field. Dominic didn't look for admiration. He simply waited, hands visible, shoulders relaxed, leaving me space to decide whether to bolt back into the cold. I slid into a back booth with the girls, choosing a seat that kept the door in my line of sight. Maddie chose the spot where she could see both the entrance and the aisle to the restrooms. June climbed in beside me, on cheeks pink from the outside air, eyes wide at the laminated menu like it was a book of miracles. My stomach growled so loudly I felt embarrassed, as if hunger was a secret I had failed to hide. I told myself to breathe, to act normal, to stop scanning every man's hands for danger. Maddie's test arrived without drama, just a steady seriousness that made her look older than her 7 years. She didn't ask for pancakes first. She wanted to know what kind of man sat across from us, what his rules were, and whether we were allowed to leave if our bodies said run. I watched Dominic's face the way I used to watch Clay's mood, searching for the flicker that warned of punishment. Instead, I saw restraint. He didn't lean in. He didn't raise his voice. He made a small motion toward the door, a clear permission, and I felt my chest loosen by half an inch. The waitress came with water and a pot of coffee that looked as if it could dissolve metal. June pointed to pictures and nodded so hard her braids bounced. Maddie picked something simple, grilled cheese and tomato soup, like she didn't trust Joy yet. I chose a club sandwich because it sounded like a meal from a life I used to have, and because part of me wanted to prove I could still order without calculating pennies. Dominic ordered nothing for himself at first. He sat, letting the silence rest between us like a blanket instead of a weapon. While we waited, my mind kept counting. Minutes until Clay might drive by the park. Minutes until some uniform might walk in and ask questions. Minutes until the warmth of this booth became another memory I couldn't afford. The menu corners were sticky. June traced them with her finger. Maddie kept her hands folded, ready. Dominic stayed still, like he knew that rushing a frightened animal only makes it bite. When the food arrived, steam rose in soft curls, and June stared at her pancakes as if they were proof that the world could be kind. She ate faster at first, then slowed, as if her body didn't trust abundance. Maddie tore her sandwich into neat pieces and dipped them carefully into soup, eyes still roaming the room between bites. I took my sandwich in both hands and felt the ridiculous urge to cry over bread. Halfway through, my old instinct took over. I wrapped the second half in a napkin and tucked it toward my bag, saving it for later because later has been the only place I could put hope. Dominic noticed. I could tell because his gaze dropped for a second, and then lifted away without judgment. He didn't say anything that would make me feel small. He only signaled the waitress again and added a second meal to go, something warm for tonight, in case the girls woke hungry. He framed it as practical, not pity, and somehow that made it easier to accept. My throat burned with words I had been swallowing for 9 nights. The booth felt warmer, the bell quieter, the world slightly farther away. Maddie's shoulders had lowered a fraction. June's syrup smile made a sticky circle on her plate. And inside me, the bigger danger pressed against my ribs, demanding a name. I could feel the next confession forming, the one about Clay, the false report, the way paperwork can become a leash. The word kidnapping surfaced like a bruise, and right behind it, CPS. I was ready to speak. The heat in May's corner grill kept fog on the windows, but my fingers still shook around the paper cup. June's cheeks were shiny with syrup. Maddie's eyes kept mapping exits, and I pretended my stomach wasn't knotted. Dominic sat across from us like a man who understood silence. The booth smelled of coffee and vinyl and something fried. I kept touching my pocket, feeling the thin edge of $11.40 like it was proof I was still in charge of my own life. Then I realized my mouth was open, and the truth was already falling out right there anyway. Clay didn't start with fists. He started with small rules that sounded reasonable. He wanted my phone location on, said it was safety. He wanted the bank account in his name, said he was better with money. He wanted to meet my friends, then made sure they stopped inviting me. One by one, he turned every relationship into a problem I had to fix, until my world shrank to our kitchen and his moods. I learned to laugh at the right moments and apologize before I knew why. By the time I understood it was control, I had nobody left. 9 nights ago, after midnight, the house felt like a box with the lid slammed down. The girls were already in pajamas, and I was cleaning a counter that was already clean, because busy hands keep fear quiet. Clay came in smelling like liquor and certainty. Something broke in the room, the familiar switch, and Maddie's face changed from child to witness. June froze with her stuffed rabbit. I didn't wait for the next mistake to be mine. I grabbed the go bag I'd hidden, slipped on shoes, lifted June, took Maddie's hand, and walked out without looking back once. Since then, a life has been measured in parking lot lights and how far a car seat reclines. I kept the girl's hair braided even when my hands trembled, because routine is the only thing that feels like love. I learned which gas stations have bathrooms that don't ask questions. I learned to eat after the girls, if anything remained. Every night I listened for footsteps near the car. I was more afraid of paperwork than winter, because paper can erase a mother without touching her. I kept telling myself that if I stayed invisible, we would stay safe in Briarhaven. But Clay doesn't need to find me to pull me back. He filed a report saying I was unstable, that I had taken the girls, that I was a danger to them. He used the word kidnapping he could hand to the state. Once that file exists, it moves on its own. I pictured someone knocking on a car window at 2:30 a.m., asking questions while my daughters stared. I pictured Maddie's small hand ripped from mine by procedure. I pictured June being carried into a house where love has conditions. That fear chased me harder than hunger did. Saying it out loud in that booth made my skin feel exposed. I waited for Dominic to question me, to demand details, to judge the choices I made. Instead, he held his stillness like a door held open. He watched the girls eat, not staring, just witnessing, and somehow that gentleness made my shame sharper. I told myself I didn't deserve rescue, only work, only consequences. My voice kept wobbling anyway, because I needed one person to know the truth before the city swallowed it. Dominic's calm didn't erase my fear, but it gave the fear a place to sit. Then Dominic reached into his coat and pulled out a phone like it was a tool, not a weapon. He made a call that lasted seconds, and people moved when he spoke. He arranged a suite at Harbor Light Suites, paid and discreet, a place where the girls could sleep flat and I could stop circling parking lots. Before I could argue, he made a second call and asked for Evelyn Hart, a family attorney. He explained she handles emergency protective orders and custody disputes. He said she would call me in the morning, and the room felt suddenly too bright. My first instinct was to push it away. Help has always come with a hook, and my life with Clay taught me to spot the line before it tightens. I started to shake my head, to insist I couldn't take anything from a man I barely knew. Dominic didn't argue. He didn't lean forward or crowd the table. He simply made it clear that he was offering a door, not dragging me through it. He would pay for the room, he would connect me to the lawyer, and what I did next would still be mine. That freedom hit me. June leaned into me, syrup on her fingers, sleepy. Maddie didn't relax. Her gaze stayed sharp, ready to test this stranger the second I blinked. I felt the half sandwich in my bag and the old habit of saving. Outside, the day was sliding toward cold, and our car would not be kind tonight. Dominic's offer sat between us like a map out of a maze. I wiped the girls' faces, gathered our things, and stood. I followed him to the parking lot with a keycard to Harbor Light Suites, and a hope that felt dangerous. Somewhere ahead waited a deadbolt. Outside May's Corner Grill, the cold slapped my cheeks and reminded me that warmth is never guaranteed. The bell behind us faded, and the parking lot opened like a dark stage under buzzing lights. I held June's hand so tight my knuckles ached, and I kept Maddie close on my other side, pretending we were just a family heading to a car after dinner. My eyes tracked every vehicle, every idling engine, every man leaning on a hood. I listened for footsteps that matched ours, for the soft double step that means someone is following. Dominic stayed a few paces ahead, not pulling, not rushing, letting me choose the speed. Accepting his help felt like swallowing fire. It could save me, or it could burn me. I kept my breath slow so the girls wouldn't copy my panic. Somewhere in my pocket, $11.40 pressed against my fingers. An anchor in chaos. A Harbor Light Suites didn't look like rescue. It looked like any mid-range building near the river. Clean brick, dark windows, a lobby that smelled faintly of lemon polish. That normality made my stomach twist, because normal places are where people ask for names. Dominic walked to the desk alone and handled whatever had to be handled without putting me in front of anyone. I waited with the girls near a fake plant, counting the seconds between elevator dings, watching a security camera blink in the corner. No one studied us. No one asked why my kids had backpacks instead of luggage. When Dominic returned, A keycard lay in his hand like a simple rectangle that carried more power than cash. The elevator hummed as we rose, and the carpeted hallway swallowed our footsteps. Maddie glanced at every door, memorizing numbers, as if safety could be solved by math for us tonight. The suite door clicked open, and I stepped into a room that felt unreal in its simplicity. 2 beds with white quilts, a small couch the color of oatmeal, a kitchenette with a microwave and a mini fridge that hummed softly, like it was glad to have a job. Clean towels sat stacked in the bathroom, smelling like soap instead of car upholstery. June climbed onto the nearest mattress and bounced once, then again, testing whether softness could be trusted. Maddie didn't bounce. She moved with purpose, checking corners, peering behind the curtain, touching the thermostat like it might be a trick. I set the to-go bag on the counter and watched steam curl from the lid when I opened it, proof that later could still be warm. My chest hurt with a feeling I couldn't name, and halfway between gratitude and grief. For 9 nights, I hadn't exhaled fully once. I walked back to the door and stared at the hardware like it was sacred. Chain, latch, deadbolt. In my old house, locks were decorations. Clay always had a key, and my fear never slept. Here I could control one small thing. My thumb slid the deadbolt over, metal on metal, and the sound of it settling into place punched air into my lungs. It was loud in the quiet room, a single click that said, "Not tonight." My knees weakened. I leaned my forehead against the door, and tears came without permission, hot and fast. I kept them silent because mothers learned to cry quietly, but Maddie saw anyway. She stood beside me, close enough to share warmth, and June crawled off the bed and wrapped her arms around my waist. I held them both and let my body shake itself empty. The hallway stayed still, as if listening. When I turned from the door, Dominic was at a distance, nearer the hallway than the beds. He didn't enter the room the way Clay used to enter spaces, as if they belonged to him. Dominic kept his eyes on me, not roaming the suite, and that restraint made me ache in a confusing way. He set a paper with Evelyn Hart's number on the counter and tapped the phone in his hand once, a promise that the call was real. Then he stepped back, letting the decision sit with me instead of on me. I realized he wasn't collecting gratitude. He wasn't asking for my story again, or my name, or my future. He was building a bridge and refusing to follow me across it. The door between us remained open for one breath, and then he walked away down the carpeted hall, footsteps fading into quiet behind him. After Dominic left, the suite felt even quieter, like the building itself was holding its breath with me. I fed the girls the extra food, wiped June's face again, and watched Maddie fold her jacket into a neat square, as if order could keep nightmares out. When they finally lay down, their bodies loosened in sleep the way mine never did. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my phone, half expecting it to light up with Clay's name, half praying for Evelyn Hart instead. Hope is a strange thing when you've been hunted. It doesn't arrive like sunlight, it arrives like a risk. I checked the deadbolt twice, then a third time, listening to the click each time as if it could rewrite the past. Tomorrow, a lawyer would call, and paperwork would become my armor. Tonight, I let the room hold us for now. A morning at Harbor Light Suites arrived without an alarm, just a thin stripe of winter light leaking through the curtains. I woke in pieces, like I always do now, checking the deadbolt before I even sat up. The metal was still thrown, solid, unmoved. Maddie slept curled tight, one hand near the edge of her pillow as if she could guard a door in her dreams. June lay sprawled across the other bed, mouth open, breathing soft. My phone sat on the nightstand beside a paper with Evelyn Hart's number, a small rectangle that felt like a grenade in my hand. I kept thinking about all the ways a single sentence can ruin you. What if CPS called and I sounded defensive? What if Clay's story, typed neatly on a report, beat my messy truth? I had been terrified of winter because it bites skin, but paperwork bites deeper, and it leaves marks no one can see. In the car, I learned to whisper, to move slowly, to keep my daughters quiet when headlights passed. Here, with heat and clean sheets, my body still waited for footsteps in the hallway. I wondered how a lawyer could turn fear into steps today. At 8:14 a.m., the phone finally buzzed, and my throat closed like it recognized the stakes. I stepped into the bathroom and shut the door softly, not wanting the girls to wake. Evelyn's voice came through steady and unhurried, the kind of calm that makes panic feel embarrassed. She didn't ask me to justify leaving. She didn't sound surprised by the kidnapping claim. She sounded like someone sorting files on a clean desk, naming the next action as if safety were a process with steps, not a miracle. I listened, gripping the sink, on and felt my spine straighten once. I gave her the timeline in plain pieces, because that was all I could manage. Clay's control began with money and access, then spread into isolation, jealousy, and rules that always changed. I told her how he cut off my friends, made my job impossible, and convinced me that being alone was my fault. I described the night I left as a switch flipping in my chest, not a dramatic escape, just a mother choosing movement over waiting. I told her Maddie started scanning rooms, and June stopped asking for bedtime stories. She treated every detail as evidence, not shame. Then she laid out what came next, and the clarity felt like a handrail. I needed to write every incident I could remember, with dates if possible, and patterns when dates were lost. I needed to list threats, controlling rules, and any moment the girls were forced to witness fear. If there were clinic visits I downplayed, school notes about anxiety, old photos, texts, or voicemails, she wanted them saved and copied. She told me to stop explaining myself to anyone, especially officials, and to route every contact through her office. Job was silence, documentation, and keeping the girls steady. Evelyn also said I would not do this alone, not if I followed directions. She was connecting me to a domestic violence advocate named Nia, someone who could help with emergency funds, temporary housing, and the kind of safety plan that doesn't fit in court filings. Nia could arrange counseling options for the girls, and a place to document my story without feeling interrogated. Evelyn explained that help should come in layers: legal protection, practical resources, and emotional steadiness. Hearing that made my chest loosen again, because it sounded like a future with support instead of luck for the first. The kidnapping report, Evelyn said, was a story Clay wrote to pull me back. Abusers use institutions when fists stop working, and they count on my fear to do the rest. She was already preparing an emergency motion and a protective order request, and she would ask the court to recognize me as the safe parent. She wanted documentation strong enough to make his narrative collapse under its own weight. For the first time, I felt the direction of my life shift. I wasn't just hiding from Clay anymore. I was building a case that could push him away, finally. After the call, I sat at the small table with a hotel pen and began the list. I wrote dates when I could, and when I couldn't, I wrote seasons, holidays, and landmarks like the first day of school, the week the furnace broke, the night Maddie hid in the closet. I sorted my phone gallery for screenshots, missed calls, anything that showed a pattern. The girls ate granola bars on the bed and watched cartoons low, their laughter cautious at first. I breathed deeper than I had in 9 days, then checked the deadbolt again, because habit is stubborn. By afternoon, Evelyn's email arrived with instructions and a warning that made my stomach drop. Because Clay had filed his report, CPS could reach out quickly, sometimes before courts catch up. If they called, I was to say nothing beyond my name and my lawyer's contact, then stop. No explaining, no defending, no trying to sound like a good mother. I repeated the rule until it felt carved into bone. Outside the suite, Briarhaven kept moving, Anne and Clay's narrative kept traveling. Inside, I gathered my paperwork like armor and waited for the next knock, hoping silence would not betray us. Daylight came thin through the curtains, and I worked at the table, stacking papers like sandbags against floodwater today again. My phone stayed on silent, yet the screen kept lighting with unknown numbers that vanished before voicemail could form fully. I wondered how Clay could reach me without a key, and the answer was always the same: systems everywhere now. The suite felt safe, but my ears still hunted for hallway sounds, elevator chimes, and footsteps that matched mine outside. Maddie colored quietly on hotel stationery, watching the door between strokes, while June built towers from sugar packets nearby me. I kept writing dates, seasons, and small humiliations, because proof is often made of ordinary moments nobody photographs well enough. When my memory blurred, I anchored it to school calendars, doctor receipts, and the week Maddie stopped sleeping alone entirely. Nia called after lunch, her voice steady like a hand on my shoulder, asking what I needed first right now. She mapped options for emergency assistance, counseling referrals, and housing lists, and she did it without pity at all. She reminded me to breathe, to eat, and to keep the girls' routines intact, even in hiding this week too. 2 hours later, a familiar name flashed on my screen, a woman from my old church group calling suddenly again. I let it ring out, but my stomach twisted, because Clay loved using friendly voices as fishing lines for me. An email arrived next, asking if I was okay, and mentioning that people were worried about Maddie lately at school. Maddie was not lately at school, and that was the point. The rumor was designed to sound plausible to others. I felt Briarhaven shrink, as if the whole city had become a hallway where Clay could hear me breathe anywhere. That afternoon, I noticed a dark sedan across the street, idling, then leaving when the front desk changed shifts quietly. I told myself it was coincidence, yet the air in the corridor felt watched, like a lantern behind frosted glass. Later, Nia texted a safety checklist, and I followed it, checking locks, exits, and keeping my notes duplicated twice daily. Evelyn's office sent a secure link for uploading files, and I felt like my fear had a container finally built. I gathered screenshots of Clay's messages, bank records, and the lease paperwork that showed how he controlled everything back then. As I worked, Maddie asked with her eyes whether I was okay, and I answered with a smile anyway today. The smile cost me, because outside, Clay was writing his own script, and strangers were reading it so fast now. A former coworker messaged me about my sudden breakdown, claiming Clay said I had become unstable and dangerous recently too. I stared at that sentence, realizing he was stealing my reputation the same way he stole my choices every day. It was a trap made of concern, and anyone who approached me could become a witness against me later easily. Nia warned me that abusers recruit communities, turning neighbors into eyes and institutions into fists without touching you at all. She helped me draft a calm statement I could repeat, but only through Evelyn if contacted by anyone official again. That evening, the front desk slipped a note under my door, saying a visitor had asked for Erin Holloway earlier. My skin went cold, and I realized Clay was close enough to poke the walls, even if he never entered. I called Evelyn's office and they told me to stay put, document everything, and let them handle contact from here. When I peeked through the peephole, a man leaned in the hallway, then drifted away without knocking on purpose quietly. Later, I saw the same dark sedan again, farther away now, and it disappeared the moment I pointed outside briefly. I did not know Mason Reed's name yet, but I felt an invisible perimeter forming around our floor each night. The protection did not ask for gratitude, and that was unsettling, because my past always demanded payment in advance first. I kept the girls close, practiced normal bedtime, and rehearsed Evelyn's rule about silence until it stuck in my mouth. The next morning, a voicemail appeared from a blocked number, asking me to call back about child welfare today, urgent. I did not call back, and my hands shook anyway, because urgency is the language Clay always used to trap. Evelyn confirmed CPS might schedule a meeting quickly, and she insisted I never speak alone. Ever, not once, not again. I packed a folder with copies, made snacks, and told the girls we had an appointment. Nothing more for them. Maddie watched my face, understanding enough to stay quiet, and June asked why my voice sounded different this morning now. I kissed their heads, checked the deadbolt, and then felt the city waiting outside like a net ready to tighten again. On the elevator down, I held my paperwork against my chest, reminding myself that evidence is also love for them. At the curb, the dark sedan rolled past once, slow, then kept going, as if giving permission to breathe briefly. I still feared Clay's reach, but I feared my own words more, because they could be twisted into proof wrong. As we drove toward the CPS office, I repeated Evelyn's rule in my head until it sounded like prayer itself. Inside the Briarhaven CPS office, the air tasted like stale coffee and copier toner. Fluorescent lights buzzed above gray chairs and plastic plants. Clipboards hung from a rack like warnings. My heartbeat sounded louder than the room. I held a thick folder against my ribs and tried not to shake. Maddie and June sat on the floor beside my knees, drawing on the backs of intake forms with worn crayons. Maddie drew houses with locks, careful lines, tiny windows. June drew birds and pancakes and a smiling sun. Their small laughter rose and fell, innocent, unaware of stakes around us. Evelyn Hart sat to my left, posture calm, hands folded, eyes steady. She didn't soften the room. She anchored me inside it. When my thoughts tried to sprint, her quiet presence pulled them back. I watched her pen rest on her notepad, ready but patient like a guard beside me. I remembered Evelyn's rule and repeated it in my head. Let the document speak. Let my mouth stay small. Clay's story was loud on purpose. My silence could look like guilt if I panicked, so I stared at a crack in the tile and breathed evenly, again and again today. The folder on my lap held scraps that had taken years to collect. A timeline written in blue ink. Screenshots of messages that shifted from sweet to sharp. Bank statements showing my paycheck disappearing. A lease with only his name. Notes I made in motel parking lots, dated by fear. One page came from Maddie's school counselor, printed on official letterhead, describing sudden anxiety, stomach aches, and a child who watched doors instead of friends. Reading it felt like being seen through glass. I hadn't told the counselor everything back then, but her observations matched my hidden reality too well today. I had a clinic record from 3 years ago, when I claimed I slipped on ice. The nurse wrote bruising inconsistent with my explanation, then circled domestic violence resources. I never called. I folded that paper and carried it like shame. Now it sat on the table as evidence, speaking. There were photos too, not gruesome, just the kind people dismiss as clumsy accidents. A wrist with faint marks, a cheek shadowed wrong, a cracked phone screen from a grab, a friend's text asking if I was safe. I hated every image, yet I handed them over anyway without blinking. Evelyn had coached me to describe control, not just moments. Clay tracked my spending, limited my gas, questioned every hour. He convinced me my family didn't care, then punished me for reaching out. He made home feel like a test I could never pass. That mattered more than a day. Clay's paperwork was its own weapon. In his report, he called me unstable, emotional, unable to care for the girls. He said I disappeared, that I threatened him, that I needed help. He copied that story to anyone who would listen, so my disappearance looked like danger instead of escape. A staff member led us back, and my legs felt hollow. Evelyn carried herself like she belonged in courtrooms, and I held on to that confidence. The caseworker's office was plain, a desk, a computer, and files stacked higher than my hope. I sat down and kept my hands still there. The caseworker read while Evelyn slid my folder across the desk. No theatrics, just paper traveling from my hands to theirs. I watched eyes move line by line, watched a pen pause, watched the screen glow. The room felt suspended, as if one breath could tip the outcome way. My mouth went dry. My palms turned cold. I tasted metal. The same taste I get when headlights sweep past my car at night. Maddie's crayons scratched softly in the waiting room beyond the door, and June hummed to herself. Their normal sounds made the silence feel sharper inside me. Then the caseworker's posture softened. They concluded my girls were not at risk with me, and that the greater risk was the home we left. The report would be corrected and de-escalated, and the alert withdrawn. Any further questions would go through Evelyn. My body forgot how to breathe. Relief hit like warmth after freezing, sudden and almost painful. My hands shook, so I hid them under my thighs. Tears came, but I kept my face angled down, dignified by habit. Maddie kept drawing, quieter now, and June slid a crayon into my palm as if it were courage. In the hallway, Evelyn outlined what came next. Emergency filings, a protective order request, and a custody plan built from my evidence. She reminded me Clay would escalate, often through reputation and institutions. The victory today was real, but temporary. I nodded, because I could feel Briarhaven listening to him. Outside, cold air filled my lungs deeper than it had in weeks. I clutched my folder like armor and guided the girls down the steps. Maddie scanned the lot, but she also swung her backpack once, a sign of loosening fear. I felt relief, not safety, and I hated difference. In the car, I stared at Evelyn's card and work ahead. Somewhere, Dominic's system had kept danger away enough for truth to land. I didn't need his presence to feel protection as structure. Clay would push again, and the next days would test my silence and my right to choose. The air outside the CPS building felt lighter, but my shoulders refused to believe it. I walked to the car with Maddie and June on either side, clutching my folder like it could keep the world from changing its mind. A gust cut through the parking lot, and my eyes still tracked every license plate, every man in a jacket, every shadow between vehicles. Relief didn't erase training. It only revealed how deep it ran. June skipped once, then looked back at me as if asking permission to be happy. Maddie kept her chin up, watchful, as if the meeting had taught her that grown-ups decide things in rooms she can't enter. Back at Harbor Light Suites, I checked the deadbolt twice before I even took off my coat. Safety had arrived on paper, but my body still waited for Clay to rewrite it, and hated myself for expecting the worst. What happens when you're believed, but not free? The questions circled me while I made the girls brush their teeth with the tiny hotel cups. Clay could still call old friends, still paint me as reckless, still weaponize concern. Every notification on my phone felt like a hook. I had proof now, but proof doesn't stop a lie from being loud. It only gives you something to hold while the noise rages. Part of me wanted Dominic to appear again, to stand between us and the city, because power feels comforting when you're exhausted. Another part of me flinched at that desire. I had spent years learning that protection can be a leash, that intensity can masquerade as love. I didn't trust my own instincts anymore. They had been bent to survive. I kept asking myself what kind of man builds a shield, then steps back without taking anything back. He didn't come to the suite door. That mattered. Instead, later that evening, the front desk called up and said a message had been left for me. No name, just a request that I check my email for an encrypted note. The note contained one practical thing, a contact number for Mason Reed, the man Dominic trusted to handle logistics. Mason didn't ask where I was. He didn't ask for gratitude. He simply confirmed that someone would be in the lobby if I needed a ride to Evelyn's office, and that the parking lot would stay quiet. I noticed after that how small frictions disappeared. A car that had hovered across the street stopped showing up. A stranger who had lingered near the elevator vanished. Dominic's protection felt like invisible scaffolding, holding space for me to do the hard, ordinary work of saving my family without stepping into our room. 2 days later, I met Dominic in the lobby. By accident or design, I couldn't tell. He stood near the glass doors, coat buttoned, eyes on the street, leaving a full arm's length between us as if distance was respect. He looked at Maddie and June first, not with sweetness, but with recognition, like he saw the vigilance and the hunger for normal. In the quiet that followed, he shared a sliver of his past, not as confession, but as context. His mother worked double shifts in a diner outside Dayton, hiding bruises under long sleeves and calling it clumsiness. Neighbors heard walls shake and chose silence because silence was easier. He grew up promising himself that if he ever had power, he would use it to stop the story from repeating. That promise sat in his face like a scar, and it made my chest ache in new ways. I waited for the price of his kindness, because that is what my brain has been trained to do. Instead, Dominic laid out a rule with the same calm he used for everything else. No one owns you. Not him, not Clay, not the city that believed paperwork over a mother's terror. He would not ask me to belong to him, would not demand access to my time, would not turn help into a bargain I could never repay. If I wanted distance, he would keep it. If I wanted silence, he would honor it. Hearing that unsettled me more than a threat would have, because it offered freedom where I expected a cage. I felt gratitude rise and then fear, because gratitude can turn into dependence if you're starving. Yet his restraint made the pull sharper, not softer. Being protected without being claimed felt like standing in sunlight again. After he left, I sat in my car in the garage and tried to understand why boundaries could feel intimate. I drove back to the suite, checked the lock, and watched the girls eat dinner like it was ordinary. My mind kept looping on the rule, no one owns you, as if repeating it could retrain my muscles. Then Naya called with news that made my stomach flip. A short-term apartment had opened at Maple Court on the west side, small but clean, and funding might cover the first months. It was the step from hiding to living, from hotel sheets to our towels. I imagined a key that stayed on my keyring, not borrowed, not temporary. The thought thrilled me and scared me because home is visible, and visibility is risk. I looked at Maddie and June, then at the deadbolt, and realized the next choice was mine, and the key to Maple Court felt heavier than the keycard at Harbor Light Suites. It wasn't borrowed plastic with an expiration date. It was metal, warm from my palm, and it meant someone expected me to come back. Naya had met us in the parking lot with a folder of paperwork and a calm smile I didn't deserve. I kept nodding, pretending my lungs weren't tight. The building sat on the west side of Briarhaven. Plain brick, narrow stairs, a hallway that smelled like laundry soap and old paint. When I opened the door, the apartment echoed, not empty in a sad way, but empty in a waiting way. One bedroom, a small living room, a kitchen with cabinets that didn't match, and a window that looked into a courtyard where a single maple tree held onto red leaves like it was stubborn. June ran in first, shoes squeaking on the bare floor, and her joy hit the walls before her hands did. She claimed the far corner of the living room with the confidence of a kid who believes space is infinite. Maddie didn't run. She stood in the doorway and watched me lock it, eyes fixed on the deadbolt as if it was a science experiment. I turned it once, then again, letting the click tell her what my voice couldn't. I kept waiting for the panic to fade, but it didn't. It shifted. In the hotel, fear had a job. Stay hidden, stay quiet, stay ready. Here, with a real address and a lease, fear started asking different questions. What if Clay searched the west side? What if someone recognized my name on a mailbox? What if I woke up and it was all temporary? Home, it turns out, can feel scarier than hiding because hiding has rules. Nia's help arrived in cardboard and tape. A volunteer dropped off a box labeled kitchen, filled with mismatched plates, 2 pans, and a bundle of forks wrapped in rubber bands. Another person carried in a used couch that smelled faintly of someone else's detergent. Groceries followed: bread, peanut butter, apples, pasta, and a bag of cereal June hugged like it was a stuffed animal. Nothing was perfect, and that made it believable. Maddie hovered near the door, touching the lock the way other kids touch new toys. She didn't smile, not right away, but her shoulders lowered a fraction each time the deadbolt held. June asked for stickers in the sing-song way she asks for everything, and I told myself I would say yes to small, harmless things. I found a roll of star stickers in a donation bag and watched her press one onto the wall like she was planting a flag. We built the apartment in tiny steps. I learned the light switch by the kitchen didn't work unless you flipped it twice. I learned the bathroom fan rattled, but it rattled like freedom, not like danger. At night, the maple tree outside the window scratched branches against the glass, and my heart jumped, then corrected itself. It was only a tree. It was only wind. I repeated that until my body listened. On the 3rd evening, when the last volunteer left and the door clicked shut behind them, the adrenaline drained out of me like a sink unplugging. I stood in the living room and suddenly couldn't remember what to do next. My hands wanted to pack a bag. My feet wanted to move. Chaos had been my map, and without it, I felt lost. I caught myself staring at the hallway as if I might run back to the car just to feel familiar, and I sat on the used couch and let the heaviness arrive. Grief didn't crash like thunder. It seeped in, quiet, asking for all the tears I postponed to keep the girls steady. I thought about the woman I was before Clay, the friends I stopped calling, the way my own laugh used to sound. For a minute, I hated this apartment because it proved I survived, and survival meant admitting what I lost. Then June climbed into my lap with her sticker sheet, and the hatred loosened. Later, Maddie tested the deadbolt one more time, slow and serious, then finally let herself smile a little. Not a big smile, just a crack where trust could start. I realized the lock wasn't magic. It couldn't erase nightmares or court dates, but it was a promise we could practice every night. Close the door, turn the bolt, sleep. Morning would still come. And that repetition was how healing would happen in our house. Dominic didn't appear with flowers or speeches. If he was involved at all, it was in the way the paperwork moved faster, in the quiet feeling that some threats stayed at a distance. I didn't need him in the room to feel what he'd given us. Space. I needed my own hands on my own doorknob. I needed proof that help could exist without ownership. That was new, and it terrified me in the best way. On the first Tuesday after we moved in, I thought about May's Corner Grill, not for food, but for proof. I wanted to sit in that booth again and measure how far we'd come. I wrote next Tuesday on a sticky note and pressed it to the fridge. I looked at the deadbolt and exhaled. On a January Tuesday, the kind that turns breath into smoke, I chose the diner on purpose. Maple Court was warm behind me, deadbolt turned, but I still left as if I might need to run. Maddie wore her school backpack even though it was afternoon, because she liked the weight. June's coat swallowed her hands, and she kept them in my pockets while we walked. May's Corner Grill glowed through fogged glass. I felt the bell before I heard it, and I wondered if the fear would follow us inside, and whether I would catch myself saving food again. Heat hit my face the moment we stepped in, and my eyes watered like I'd been crying. The air smelled of coffee and onions, and the windows were cloudy with other people's warmth. We slid into the same red vinyl booth near the back, the seat squeaking under my coat. I watched the doorway out of habit, then forced my gaze to my girls instead. Maddie scanned once, then let her shoulders drop a fraction. June stared at the menu pictures, delighted by how ordinary they looked. I ordered without counting pennies, and I kept my hands on the table. When the plates arrived, June's eyes widened at the stack of pancakes, and she leaned close as if warmth had a smell. Maddie took her grilled cheese and tomato soup with the same careful hands she used to hold my sleeve in parking lots. I ate my club sandwich slowly, but not to make it last. I ate because my body deserved fuel, and because my girls needed to see me finish. The old reflex to wrap half for later rose, then faded. Later no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a room I could enter with them. June drew in leftover syrup with the tip of her fork, making a smiley face that made my chest ache. Maddie dipped each bite into soup, but her eyes stayed softer than before, less like a guard and more like a kid. I noticed tiny changes. The way June swung her legs without checking my face first. The way Maddie rested her elbow on the table instead of bracing to bolt. Healing was not a switch. It was a series of small permissions. I let myself laugh once, then didn't apologize for it. The sound surprised me, and it stayed. Halfway through the meal, June unrolled a sheet of paper she'd guarded in her backpack. On it were 3 figures in front of a building and a tree, drawn with purple crayon confidence. Above the figures she had written one word, home, the letters uneven but determined. I pressed the paper against my palm and felt my throat tighten. For years my body had been clenched, ready for impact. That single word made something release, as if my lungs finally trusted space. I stared until my eyes blurred, then breathed. Not a perfect breath, but deep enough to change me. Through the fogged window I saw a dark car at the edge of the parking lot, idling where streetlights faded. I didn't need to see the driver clearly to know the shape of that presence. It was the same quiet wait that had paused in Elmwick Park and then stepped back. Dominic did not come inside. He didn't wave, didn't demand thanks, didn't turn my life into a story about him. He simply watched long enough to be sure we were safe. Then the car rolled forward and disappeared into winter gray. I felt gratitude and relief at his distance. Back at the booth, I looked at my daughters and understood what Dominic's rule protected most. Not my pride, not his reputation, my autonomy. Clay's worst crime had been making my choices feel illegal. Now I had choices again, slow and fragile. Evelyn, Naya, and even Dominic's unseen logistics formed a net beneath us, but I still had to step forward myself. Safety was not a hero. It was a system. It was the folder in my bag, the lock on my door, the courage to keep using them every day. It was practice, like brushing teeth, until fear loosened. We finished our meal, and I noticed I hadn't scanned the exits in several minutes. That didn't mean danger was gone. Court dates still waited, and Clay still had a voice in Briarhaven. But today, in this booth, my girls were eating like kids, not survivors. Maddie tucked the home drawing back into June's backpack with careful hands, as if it were evidence and treasure. Outside, snow flurried lightly. I thought about Maple Court, more about turning the deadbolt tonight, and about building a Tuesday ritual that taught our bodies what normal could be. 1 week at a time, 1 breath. On the way out, the bell rang again, and cold air curled around our ankles. June held my hand and bounced on her toes, impatient for the car heater. Maddie walked beside me, backpack strapped straight, eyes forward but not panicked. I glanced once toward the lot and saw only empty space where the dark car had been. The absence felt like respect. Dominic had done what he came to do, and then left, trusting me to keep living. That trust was the final gift. We drove home, and for once, home meant a place, not a direction for us. That night at Maple Court, I turned the deadbolt and listened to it settle, the same click that had saved us before, now belonging to our own door. I pinned June's home drawing to the fridge and watched Maddie soften, just a little. If you are listening and you are still running, please hear me. Safety is built. It starts with one brave step, then another, and it grows through allies, paperwork, and small daily choices. If this story gave you hope, please like, share, and comment one word that means strength to remind others they are not alone today.